So what we want to do is we want to work out what works for you and your body so that we've got harmony between the two things. So one of the things that I do is I teach women my own personal emotional map for navigating chronic illness. And to me, there are 4 stages emotionally of being with chronic illness. And in each of those emotional stages, then you have different tools and resources that you need for each of those 4 stages. And that tells you what can support your career and working in each of those 4 stages as well.
Would you mind giving us just a really broad level overview of what those stages are? Is that giving away a secret?
I'd be very happy to share this
Oh,
with you because I know that this map comes from my own experience, but I also know this resonates immediately with women. And what happens with, navigating chronic illness, and especially with trying to navigate career, is you just are emotionally at a wash each different day with different feelings, and your body's got potentially different, capacity on different days. So you don't even know where you are or how to get somewhere. And you think it's this dichotomy between well and moving forward or in bed going nowhere. And that seesaw is what adds the stress. So here's the map. There are 4 emotional stages of living with chronic illness in terms of what's going on emotionally, and they correlate in part to the physical capacity. But as you learn the map, you start to be able to renegotiate. So the first stage, if we think of it, you've got a high flare, you've got really high symptoms, you're looking for a diagnosis, you get a shock diagnosis, like right at the beginning. And this is a lot of where people navigating long COVID are. This is what I call being emotionally at sea. And I want you to think about it as you're at sea and you're in a little boat and you can't see land and you don't know where you're going, and your only job is to be in the boat. And I built this map by asking myself in those deep times of being bedbound or being whipped out when, the specialist says you don't leave this hospital without treatment today. That's you're at sea in this second. You weren't at sea the 10 minutes before you walked into his office, but you are now. So in that stage, what you need to do is understand that you're at sea and there are particular tools and strategies for navigating that emotionally and working with that. And one of the key things is you need to know how to navigate uncertainty and be with the unknown. And when you have the skills for knowing how to navigate the unknown, then when you're at sea, you know exactly what you're doing. The second stage is where you get a little better, treatment starts to work, you have a little more capacity, and you can see just a treatment process ahead. And you basically emotionally wash up on the beach. And you are emotionally exhausted from being at sea. And everybody, once you wash up on the beach, this is usually the spot, particularly if you have something like cancer treatment where everybody sort of knows the protocol and process, everybody leaves. Like they're like, whew, we made it through the patient in crisis, process. You can get to the grocery store. Okay, there's, appointments once a month, not once a week. You're good. But what happens is the lag of where you've been starts to wash over your system. So in this stage of washing up on the beach, you might be gently returning to work. You might be negotiating what work looks like. You might be thinking, okay, I can't work the hours and the way that I used to work. I can't go back and do that. So this stage, you need an actual process and tools that help you emotionally know, how do I navigate this sense of being washed up on the beach? The third stage is what I call walking through the forest. And this stage is where you've got a bit more energy. Okay, you're starting to really, return to work, starting to socialize a little. You're not planning your 50 years ahead, but you are starting to plan a little ahead, and you've got some capacity. This is the stage at which usually you start to try and push through in the extreme. At each stage, you've probably been trying to push through, but this is critical. If you don't take the time to actually ground that energy and build all the right systems to maintain this capacity, you will burn out very fast. So this stage is, yes, we've got more capacity, but we're really learning what really works for us. Now, the fourth emotional stage is where you're reasonably well, this is your new normal. You may not be where you were, before diagnosis or 10 years ago, but you've actually got some process on board. And what happens is, I think of this as returning to the village. You start to really integrate into your new normal. And it's also the case that people start, usually you have something, you've learned how to navigate something difficult, and you will start to share your wisdom. Not because you're out there spruiking it necessarily, but people will come up to you and they'll be navigating divorce or layoffs or, a diagnosis themselves. And you will have wisdom that helps them, and you will just give it freely. And that's actually what started to happen to me. I was doing that for 10 years before I moved into this work formally.
Those 4 stages make me feel seen. And I can imagine that woman after woman with chronic illness tells you that same thing.
Exactly. And the thing about the stages is you might return to the village, but one blood test, one flare, and you're back at sea. But once you know the map, you can navigate that with much more confidence. It might also be you're at sea and you get a treatment and you skip all your energies right back. We're looking for the practical emotional strategies at each of those stages. And so you'll see the map is actually the map for navigating chronic illness. And then we work out, what do we do at each of those stages for you? And how does your career map into this? So when you're at sea and you're, at work, what do we do to make that emotionally more easeful for you and for your body?
The map gives knowledge, gives a sense of where you are on the planet of chronic illness. And that brings about a sense of power, the knowledge in and of itself.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that there's a map in the first place makes you know very clearly you're not alone.
Exactly. And it's the case that what happens when you know there's a map is all of those feelings and thoughts and everything that's going on at any moment in your experience, you can start to say, oh, hang on a sec, that's here. So if I'm at sea, what usually happens when you're at sea, particularly for intelligent, talented, creative women, we're like strategizing, how do I get back and get that mountain climbed? And I want to be really gentle with you and say, when you're at sea, honey, because we're always trying to push through and get to the next stage. But if I say to you, okay, here's what you do at sea, then I've given you something to emotionally, mentally, and career-wise to do that actually maps the emotional stage. Because creating from exhaustion, despair, and misery, not only is that not a great creative process and not good for you, it's actually not good for anybody you're working with. It's actually not the way we want to work anymore, because that's a very industrial model way of even thinking. I'm in misery, so let me create something. And what I want to do with you is say, here's what we do, because being at sea can be highly creative if you know how to tap into it. And so we want to have creativity that actually doesn't burn the body, and the creativity actually brings energy and joy into your system. And in many ways, emotionally, we know that whatever happens physically, as we demystify the emotions, as we de-stress the push, and I've got to work out my whole career, naturally your body's going to feel better. You are going to feel better. And emotionally, that's going to move you on through the stages. And so even if you are at sea, once you know this process, then you can use that time productively in a way that actually serves your whole life, because you're not in this trap of trying to push your body and you're trying to get out of the stress by creating more stress for yourself.